What will the Blackhawks forward lines look like on opening night? I'll discuss that on today's episode, and we'll dive into the biggest winners and losers from day one of free agency.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Per usual, just a quick reminder off the top to go and hit that like button. Comment down below as well as to which of the moves that the Blackhawks made on day one of free agency was your favorite. And be sure to subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube as well. It's the best way that you can go and show some support. I'm currently on the climb to 2,000 subscribers. I know I'm getting a lot of new viewers here with the Blackhawks making so many notable moves on day one of free agency. They also, of course, held the second overall pick in the 2024 NHL draft, made two other first-round selections. It's a crucial time for the Chicago Blackhawks in them taking the next step of their rebuild. And I'll be having tons of Blackhawks-related content coming out all summer long, so please make sure to go and hit that subscribe button. 100% free, won't cost you anything, and does go a long way for yours truly. Last but certainly not least, got to let you all know today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel. Sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get daily boosts and bonuses all summer long. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. To kick things off on the show here today, following a handful of new additions to the forward group, headlined by the free agent signings of Tyler Bertuzzi and the return of Teuvo Teravainen, Patrick Maroon, Craig Smith also got deals. Joey Anderson got re-signed as well. But with that being the case, with a lot of new faces in this Blackhawks forward group, I thought it would be fun on today's show to go over a way too early outlook at the Hawks forward group and discuss who we're thinking is going to be part of the NHL roster on opening night and maybe even what the forward lines could potentially look like. But before I get there, real quick, the Blackhawks, after I recorded yesterday's episode, right after I recorded yesterday's episode, because of course, that's always how it works. Right after I got done recording, the Blackhawks made their eighth and final signing of the opening day of free agency as they added veteran defenseman TJ Brodie to a 2-year, $3.75 million contract. And quite honestly, I felt like this was a little bit of overkill, particularly at 2 years, but Brodie does provide size and experience, more of that on the back end. And I had a feeling not only were the Hawks going to add a defenseman to kind of shore up their second pairing, but I figured, if you all remember, when I went through my free agency preview and talked about potential free agent defensemen, I expected them to do that. And I also thought they could potentially add another veteran who they won't mind being, maybe the 6th or 7th defenseman on a cheap 1-year deal. Well, to see Brodie got a 2-year contract, I don't really care about the money. The Blackhawks are in a situation where money doesn't really matter, but at 2 years, that one was a little bit interesting to me. But Brodie's a 6'2", 190-pound left-handed defenseman who just turned 34 last month in June. And this past year, he tallied 26 points, 1 goal, and 25 assists in 78 games for the Toronto Maple Leafs, his third year up in Toronto. And his previous 2 had gone much better. A lot of bad decision-making out of Brodie this year kind of chased him out of Toronto, right? And that's kind of a narrative we've heard a lot out of Maple Leaf defensemen. But his first 2 years with the Maple Leafs were really solid. A good puck-moving defenseman who was really solid in his own end and had a lot of good seasons in his first 10 NHL campaigns as a member of the Calgary Flames. Interesting enough, Brodie is going to be playing for a non-Canadian team for the first time in his NHL career. He spent 10 years in Calgary and then the past 3 seasons, like I mentioned, with the Toronto Maple Leafs as well. He's not much of an offensive threat at this point in his career. He's only scored more than 6 goals twice in his 14 NHL campaigns and only had more than 20 points twice in the last 5 years, but he has in the past been a good top 4 capable type of defenseman. I'm sure the Hawks are wanting him to get back to that past form and hope that he can find his footing a little bit here in Chicago and bounce back from that tough last year that he had in Toronto. But all in all, as far as a grade for this deal, I give it a C. seemed like just maybe a little bit of an overpay considering the down year that Brodie had. And then 2 years, that I don't really get whatsoever. Like, if it was a 1-year contract, I would understand, but 2 years kind of clogs up the blue line a little bit. And I'm actually going to be going through an outlook at the Blackhawks blue line on tomorrow's episode, foreshadowing here a little bit. So make sure to stay tuned for that one. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out. You can also turn on those push notifications to get notified right when the episode drops. But yeah, 2 years for TJ Brodie here. This one felt a little bit odd to me. I'll dive more into that when I go into a defensive outlook on tomorrow's episode. But I do wonder, the last thing I'll leave you with is that there could be a potential trade coming on the back end for the Blackhawks some other time here in the summer. But getting back to the gravy of segment 1 here, and it's talking about the Blackhawks forward group. After adding Teravainen, Bertuzzi, Maroon, Craig Smith, Joey Anderson is coming back as well. They, of course, acquired Ilya Mikheyev from the Vancouver Canucks. How is the Blackhawks forward group going to look on opening night now that things are definitely a little bit more crowded? And if you all remember, in the final episode I posted before free agency, I said I don't really know if the Blackhawks have a lot of open spots to go and make a ton of moves. Well, Kyle Davidson said, screw that. We're going to have a much better roster this upcoming year, and we're going to have a lot of training camp battles going on. But as far as the players who we know are certified NHLers at this point in time, this is kind of how I'm going to start shaping things out. The top line, I think Connor Bedard is absolutely going to be centering it. And I do believe Philip Kurashev in training camp right out the gate is going to get an opportunity to secure that spot up on that top line with Connor Bedard. Based on what he did with him last year and how well he performed, he took that huge step in his development. I think he deserves that opportunity. But with so many guys now in the mix, he's going to have to earn that spot, I think, fully to keep it. But I do expect him to get that spot out of the gate. And I wouldn't be surprised if Tyler Bertuzzi started up on that top line with Bedard and Kurashev, adding a little bit of sandpaper net front presence to that trio. That was something that the Blackhawks kind of could have used more of last year. And I don't think it was a surprise to see Nick Foligno, who kind of provides a similar makeup, not as offensive minded, not as young, not as good of a skater, maybe not even as much of a sandpaper-y type of guy as Bertuzzi is at his age. I think this is a perfect fit, and I do believe Bertuzzi is going to get that opportunity out of the gate. Second line, we can see Taylor Hall potentially there. We could also see him on the top line with Bedard. I quite honestly think that's going to be a little bit of a revolving door like it was last year. Taylor Hall will probably get a chance there. Just for the sake of this conversation, I have him on the left wing on the second line, Jason Dickinson centering the second line, and then Teuvo Teravainen as the right wing. That is a much better second line than the Hawks have had in quite some time. And then in the bottom six, I have Nick Foligno, Ryan Donato, and Andreas Athanasiou on the third line, and then Ilya Mikheyev, Patrick Maroon, and Craig Smith as the fourth line, with Joey Anderson serving as the extra. So that's 13 forwards right there, certified NHLers, you got to believe, in that group. And then you also have to consider some guys who are trying to push to make the roster. Lucas Reichel, he's not just going to get handed this opportunity. He certainly can't because of all the additions the Hawks made. He's going to have to go and earn that NHL job right out of the gate. He and Frank Nazar, based on these ads, are the only two I realistically think could make the NHL roster out of camp. I think if Frank Nazar has a good camp, he could potentially go into that 2C slot, move Jason Dickinson down to the third line, maybe move Ryan Donato down to the fourth line. I think that's an ideal spot for Frank Nazar, but he's going to have to earn it. He's going to have a sharp performance in training camp. Nothing is going to be handed to him. And quite honestly, I wouldn't even be surprised if Kyle Davidson had him start in Rockford regardless, because it's clear that he does want to over-ripen prospects at this point in time. But Nazar might force their hand if he has that good of a training camp. But based on those ads, I just don't see, Landon Slaggert is really going to have a standout camp to make this team. And he's kind of in the same boat as Nazar. I don't think Davidson and the staff wouldn't mind sending him to Rockford unless he shows he's more than NHL ready. Cole Gutman, Colton Dock, those guys are just going to have such uphill battles going into this year's camp. But honestly, that's not the worst thing in the world. That type of competition, that type of fire right at the start of the season, it's something that the Blackhawks got to kind of instill into this organization once again. And having training camp battles for jobs is a good problem to have. It's a good thing in instilling that competition. I think that's important. I think that's going to help the Blackhawks take that next step. And just based on all the veteran additions that they made, it was clear they wanted to add more experience and get a little bit older. And as Mark Lazarus of The Athletic pointed out, crazy enough, the Blackhawks are actually going to be one of the older teams in the NHL this year, but they also definitely added more help to the top six. Tyler Bertuzzi. I do think that contract was 1 year too long and maybe a bit too much money. Wasn't my favorite contract that the Blackhawks gave out, but he's going to help that top six or whatever role he plays in. He can be a Swiss Army knife type of guy. Teuvo Teravainen is going to help the offense as well. And then even just the bottom six forward lines that I just rattled off, so much better than what we've seen in the past. Legitimate NHL quality players in the bottom six. It's been forever since we could say that about the Chicago Blackhawks. So I think that's, super noteworthy and a big time check mark for the Blackhawks. Maybe they didn't go and get the most notable guys on the market, but quite honestly, I didn't expect them to. And they filled out this roster and made it sure look a lot better than it was just a couple of weeks ago than what we were expecting them to go into next season with. So all in all, again, I'm really happy with the forward additions that the Blackhawks made. Teuvo wasn't my favorite option, but on a 3-year deal, there's no harm there. Patrick Maroon, cheap 1-year deal. There's no loss there. Same with the Craig Smith edition. Joey Anderson, under $1 million. Cheap deal for him. I really liked what the Blackhawks did in order to get better here. Go and let me know your comments down below in the comment section as to your thoughts on what this Blackhawks forward group looks like compared to what we've seen in years past. How good of a job do you think Kyle Davidson did in making this forward group better? Let me know your thoughts down below. But there are my thoughts and my early look at the Blackhawks forward group for this upcoming season. Coming up in just a moment here, I will get into a full recap of a chaotic day one of NHL free agency. But first, real quick, I got to talk to you all about the fine folks over at FanDuel. I love sports and I love them so much. I wish they never stopped. But unfortunately, the Stanley Cup playoffs, the NBA Finals have come to a close, and now there's fewer games, and the sports just aren't sportsing like they used to. But fortunately, FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want, wherever I want. All I got to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime that I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. FanDuel's hooking you up, boosts and bonuses with all summer long. And they got, I know sports aren't going crazy right now, but Major League Baseball is taking over. FanDuel has lines and props for every single game, and they also have odds for the Copa America that's going down right now. I'm going to be taking Venezuela plus 160 over Canada. Sorry to all my Canadian folks out there. When they go head-to-head on Friday. Been very exciting to watch the Copa America. Unfortunately, the United States didn't look all that great last night, and the officials weren't all that great either, but you can be winning money while watching the Copa America with FanDuel. And again, FanDuel is offering daily boosts and bonuses all summer long. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Segment 2, not only did the Blackhawks have themselves quite a chaotic day on the market, as I mentioned earlier, 8 free agent signings. Your boy was going crazy yesterday, but a boatload of other teams made notable moves. It was the largest spending day on free agency in NHL history. I believe it totaled over $1 billion for the first time. And quite honestly, it was hard to keep up with. And I'm sure there are some of you out there that kind of feel the same way. So many moves, so many signings being announced left and right. It was like, oh my goodness, it's hard to take all of this information right now. So I figured I would go through all the most notable signings and trades that were made yesterday when the free agent market opened, and I'll talk about my favorite moves, my least favorite moves, and the biggest winners and biggest losers from day one of NHL free agency. Go and comment your thoughts. Which teams' moves did you like the most? Which teams did you like the least? Please let me know your feelings on that down in the comment section. As far as the notables go, I think we got to start with Steven Stamkos, because that was maybe the most noteworthy name on the market. Sounded like he wanted to go back to Tampa Bay, but the Bolts gave him a little bit of an insulting offer with a $3 million AAV, and I'm sure Steven Stamkos had to feel super disrespected by that. Ultimately, he winds up not signing with the Lightning. and signs with the Nashville Predators, who, baby, had themselves quite a day. A 4-year, $8 million deal with the Nashville Predators. Stamkos, I didn't think he was ever going to be an option for the Blackhawks. And quite honestly, with him turning 35 this year, I know he just had 81 points this last season, but you got to think he's going to start slowing down sometime soon. And if he was wanting term, I just don't think there was any way that the Blackhawks were going to give him that. And $8 million, when he's 38, 39 years old, those last 2 years of that deal, you got to wonder what it's going to look like, how the Preds fans and front office is going to feel about it. But regardless of that, I really was pleasantly surprised, I will say, even though I don't like the organization. Nashville finally started rolling the dice on the market for the first time ever. They snatched up Steven Stamkos. In response, by the way, the Tampa Bay Lightning went out and signed Jake Gensel to a whopping 7-year, $9 million contract, $9 million per year, of course. Again, I never really thought he was a realistic option for the Blackhawks, mostly because he turns 30 this season. And you got to wonder how Bolts fans are going to feel about that deal in those final years. But Gensel, of course, has been a very phenomenal offensive player all throughout his career. Sidney Crosby's right-hand man, a regular 30 to 40 goal scorer, and just had 81 points in 78 games this past year for the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Carolina Hurricanes. Tampa Bay also this afternoon announced that Victor Hedman had signed a 4-year extension. So those are the Bolts' two notable moves in free agency. But not only did the Preds snatch up Steven Stamkos from them, they also snatched up Jonathan Marchessault from the Vegas Golden Knights. Marchessault said, he wanted to resign in Vegas, but didn't feel like the Golden Knights front office really gave him much of a push. And ultimately, all he wanted, according to reports, was just a team to take a chance on him in terms of giving him that term in a safe home for the next handful of years. He just wanted somebody to believe in him. That ended up being the Nashville Predators. 5-year, $5.5 million AAV for Marchessault in Nashville. Like Stamkos, though, an aging forward, believe it or not, he's going to turn 34 this upcoming season, but has always been a reliable goal scorer, has the Vegas Golden Knights franchise records for numerous stats, was one of the driving forces for that organization, being great from the get-go, is a winner, a well-liked guy in the locker room, a big ad along with Steven Stamkos and, of course, Philip Forsberg, who's already in Nashville. And then after losing Ryan McDonagh, the Preds went out and signed Brady Shea as well to a 7-year, $7 million deal. Turns 31 in March, a really good offensive defenseman. The last 3 years with the Carolina Hurricanes has turned into a really good pro. So how about Nashville swinging for it? And they signed UC Saros to an 8-year contract extension as well. Alexander Carrier ended up signing a 3-year contract extension. He stayed there, didn't end up hitting the market. So a very notable day for Blackhawk division rival Nashville Predators. Also on the market, Patrick Kane, of course, speaking of notable Blackhawks, ended up signing with the Red Wings. I don't know if many people saw that one coming, but elected to sign a 1-year deal to remain there. It's a $4 million contract with $2.5 million worth of incentives. And believe it or not, our boy Patty Kane is going to turn 36 years old this upcoming fall. Very interesting, but had that hip surgery, looked like he was the Patrick Kane of old in his first year with the Red Wings. Detroit didn't really make any notable moves other than that, though. They replaced Shane Gostisbehere with Eric Gustafsson, which I think is hilarious. They let David Perron end up signing with the Ottawa Senators. Not a very, very good day for the Detroit Red Wings, in my opinion, other than bringing back Patrick Kane. A similar deal was signed by Matt Duchene to remain with the Dallas Stars, someone who I thought the Blackhawks could potentially look at on the market. 1-year, $3 million deal to remain there. The Stars also, I thought, made one of the most boneheaded signings of the day when they gave Matt Dumba a 2-year deal with a $3.75 million AAV. That is absolutely bananas to me that he signed the same deal basically as Alexander Carrier. I mean, Dumba has not been very good the last couple of years in his career. Stars also added Ilya Labushkin, who is a questionable defenseman. They lost Scott Wedgwood. Not a very good day for the Dallas Stars either. A good day, I thought, though, for the Florida Panthers. Obviously, as the Stanley Cup champ, you're going to lose some guys. They lost Montour. They lost OEL. They lost, Ryan Lomberg, but they got Sam Reinhart, I thought, at a pretty cheap cheap deal. 8 years, $8.6 million AAV to return in Florida for, usually how many players depart Stanley Cup teams. Florida did a pretty good job, I thought, today. Brett Pesce, one of the most notable right-handed defensemen out there on the market that I thought the Blackhawks could pursue. He ultimately ended up signing a big deal in New Jersey, 6 years by $5.5 million. And that was kind of the theme with a lot of the right-handed defensemen. They signed for term. And I think that's what kind of knocked the Blackhawks out of that market. And they were happy to take Alec Martinez, a lefty, but who has played on the right side historically throughout his career. So still a deal that winds up making sense. I feel like the Blackhawks maybe would have liked someone a little bit younger and someone who was a true righty, but Alec Martinez is absolutely still going to suffice in that 1-year role, that 1-year contract that he signed. No real downside to that deal. Brendan Dillon also signed a 3-year, $4 million deal in New Jersey. And how about the day that the Devils had? They also, I guess they traded for Jacob Markstrom. They didn't get him in the free agent market, but this has the potential to be a really good team once again this year. I mean, just even on their blue line, they have Nemec, Luke Hughes, Dougie Hamilton, Brett Pesce, and now Brendan Dillon with Jacob Markstrom in net. They solved their goaltending problems there. Look out for the New Jersey Devils. Toronto added 2 veteran defensemen on way too big of deals, I thought. Chris Tanev, 6 years, $4.5 million. That's not a bad AAV, but the guy's going to turn 35 in December. He'll be 41 years old when that expires. Yeah, I'm sure it's going to turn out great. And same with Ekman Larsson. 4 years? Why are you doing this, Toronto? Do you never learn? At $3.5 million, Ekman Larsson's going to turn 33 in a few days. He'll be 37 when that expires. I'm sure Maple Leafs fans won't lose their minds over that. The Leafs also re-signed Wool. They also re-signed Max Domi as well. That was their most notable moves. Washington, I thought, had a pretty solid day as well. Matt Roy, another right-handed defenseman that I mentioned, signed a 6-year, $5.75 million AAV deal with the Caps. That's a little bit too rich for me. I know Roy has established himself as one of the premier shutdown defensemen in this league. I don't know if I'd be willing to take that much of a gamble on him, but the Capitals also added Jacob Chychrun and a nice deal for Nick Jensen. That's a good one-for-one swap for them. They also got Andrew Mangiapane and, of course, acquired Pierre-Luc Dubois in a trade over the summer a couple of weeks ago. How about the Seattle Kraken really going for it here? Gave out some fatty deals. Brandon Montour, 7 years by $7.14 million, and Chandler Stevenson getting a 7-year deal as well at $6.25 million. Ruh-roh. Zadorov and Lindholm both signing big boys with the Boston Bruins. Zadorov 6 years at $5 million. He turns 30 in December. That has the potential to go very wrong. Elias Lindholm 7 at $7.75 million. I know he was one of the best two-way centers on the market, but 7 years, man, that's a long deal. The Edmonton Oilers, I thought, actually made some sharp moves. Victor Arvidsson, 2 years at $4 million. Very solid cap hit. Jeff Skinner, good deal for them to take a gamble on him. 2 years at $3 million. They also re-signed Corey Perry and both Connor and Josh Brown. So a pretty solid day from the Oilers. San Jose had a pretty solid day as well. They signed Tyler Toffoli, 4 years by $6 million. Maybe 1 year too long in my book, but going to help their offense for sure, as is Alex Wenberg. Sharks also, of course, acquired Barclay Goodrow a couple of weeks ago. The Columbus Blue Jackets gave out a big deal to Sean Monahan, which kind of made me scratch my head. 5 years by $5.5 million. Did they forget that he was on the back of a milk carton for 3 years there? Anthony Duclair also signing a big boy, 4 years with the New York Islanders. Will provide some speed. Maybe he'll get a shot with Matt Barzal and Bo Horvat there on that top line, but a 4-year commitment to Anthony Duclair when he's kind of been a roller coaster ride throughout his career is real interesting. And a 7-year deal for Jake DeBrusk in Vancouver. That's a big gamble by the Canucks. And yeah, I know he's a much more capable offensive player than Ilya Mikheyev is, but 7 years at $5.5 million. Dicey move there by the Canucks. Worst move of the day, I think, though, goes to the Los Angeles Kings. 4 years at $3.8 million for Joel Edmondson. 4 years at nearly $4 million. That could wind up being a disaster for them. That was their attempt to replace Matt Roy. Toughie there for for the whole LA Kings. And then just before I recorded, Pavel Buchnevich signed a 6-year, $8 million extension in St. Louis. And it's almost like they haven't learned from signing players to long-term. It's put them in this horrible position moving forward. I think Buchnevich is a good player. $8 million for 6 years. That's a little bit of a gamble to me. So those were the most notable moves in my mind, breaking everything down. As far as the biggest winners, I think the Nashville Predators absolutely have to be in that conversation, right? I know they gave out some term to some older guys, but as a fan of the Predators, you have to be happy to see them actually going for it for once, right? And not being middle of the pack. They finally picked a direction. They have to be a winner for actually doing that. New Jersey, I think, has to be a winner as well, shoring up that blue line. And they, of course, have a lot of young studs on the offensive side of things. I actually think Florida did a really solid job, too. I know they lost Montour. I know they lost OEL on the back end. I still think, they did a really solid job altogether and got Sam Reinhart back on a rather cheap deal when he could have hit the market and broke the bank. And I also do really like what the Blackhawks and the San Jose Sharks did. Not anything too notable, but moves that are going to make these teams better this upcoming season. And the Edmonton Oilers, I thought, made some smart, cheap adds as well in Jeff Skinner. They brought back Adam Henry, Corey Perry, and added Victor Arvidsson, I think, on one of the best value contracts out there on the market. As far as my biggest losers, Carolina just kind of watched everyone go and then gave William Carrier a 6-year deal at $2 million. That was interesting. Winnipeg didn't really do anything. They lost, they lost Brendan Dillon, They lost their backup goalie to Connor Hellebuck, and they, of course, have problems with Rucker McGroarty and Nikolai Ehlers. Tough situation for Winnipeg, as always, in the offseason. LA, they gave that big contract to Joel Edmondson as a try to replace Matt Roy. Didn't really do anything of note other than trade Pierre-Luc Dubois. Maybe that's a win in their book. I don't know, but they didn't do much. Dallas, I think, gave out some bad contracts and are going to have a much worse defense than they've had in the past. I'm now out on the Dallas Stars, I think, because of that. Detroit didn't really do anything noteworthy other than bringing back Kaner and, of course, made that horrible Jake Wallman trade. Toronto gave out term to OEL and Chris Tanev way too long. Who else do I got? Seattle giving out 7-year deals to Chandler Stevenson and who else did they? Brandon Montour. Yeah, big time gambles out of those teams. So they're my biggest winners. They're my biggest losers. And those are the most noteworthy moves made on a hectic opening day of free agency. Let me know your biggest winners and losers down in the comment section below. But coming up in just a moment here, I will share my thoughts on Joel Quenneville, Stan Bowman, and Al MacIsaac being reinstated by the NHL. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Again, quick reminder to hit the like button, comment down below, and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. And also, go and check out the new Locked On Sports Today that Locked On has launched. It's the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and Locked On Sports Today is there for you 24/7, covering all the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On. Plus, we even got national shows covering every single league. So be sure to go and check out Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and to subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Segment 3. Typical news bomb was dropped by the NHL yesterday, and if you may have missed it, that's quite honestly their purpose in the timing of this news bomb. And for those who don't know, the NHL, they like to keep things hush-hush. It's a little bit of a scumbag league. I'm just calling a spade here. They like to keep things on the down low, not really make anything too notable. They don't like to admit they're wrong. They don't like to make changes. They kind of do things in a little bit of a slimy way. So with yesterday being, of course, the most noteworthy day across the NHL, right, where announcements are flying off the shelves left and right, and it was also Canada Day for our friends up north of the border, of course, it was the perfect time for the NHL to throw a little bit of a news bomb out there and hope it got swept under the rug, because that's what the NHL does. They sweep things under the rug. Don't like it. It's just the sad nature of the truth of the business. And if you haven't recognized that now, I don't know what to tell you. It's just kind of how the NHL goes about things. But yesterday, the NHL made the announcement that Stan Bowman, Al MacIsaac, and Joel Quenneville have been reinstated by the NHL after having that multi-year ban following their mishandlings of the 2010 Kyle Beach incident. And of course, people are going to have very, very disparaging feelings over this type of decision. I feel like people are either going to lean, this shouldn't have happened, or, oh, you got to give people a second chance. Quite honestly, for me, I don't even mean to be like this. I really am torn on this subject because one side of me does believe that people get second chances and should get that opportunity to better themselves and prove that they have better themselves if they have gone through the proper steps in order to get to that point. And, that's what's claimed about Quenneville and Bowman and MacIsaac. The honest truth of it is, who really knows what they really did and how sincere their work and their progress was to take all the classes and the steps that they needed to clear in order to get reinstated by the NHL, right? We don't get an inside look as to how all of that works. We don't get an inside look as to how serious they're taking all this stuff. But I wasn't surprised whatsoever to see that the NHL finally did reinstate them. I thought it was only going to be a matter of time. It's tough. It's tough for me because I think they should get that opportunity, but at the same point in time, because they mishandled such a serious situation and the way they handled it and the way they acted made it seem like they just brushed it off and weren't thinking for Kyle Beach. They weren't thinking in the best interest of Kyle Beach. And they were the ones who had a man's career and life basically in their hands, and they made the wrong choice. Because they made that wrong choice and because they made poor missteps following that, Bradley Aldrich was allowed to go and do that to someone else. And I think that's absolutely inexcusable. So because of that, there is part of me that feels like these guys shouldn't be back in the league, but I know how the NHL works. I know how the NHL operates, and it was only going to be a matter of time. I mean, we're talking about the same league that gave Mike Babcock another opportunity, right? And there were stories of how terrible this guy was, and they give him another opportunity, and what does he do? He pisses it away in 3 weeks, right? That's how the NHL works. It's just this recycled, same people in the league with power over and over and over again. And it's absolutely broken. And that's why I think these guys shouldn't be allowed to be back in the league, because we need to break that cycle. And also they prove that they're not capable of handling much more serious situations in the game of hockey properly. They made a series of serious poor judgments in a matter, again, like I said, that's much more serious than a game. So because of that, I don't think they deserve this opportunity. And what I come back to, I don't know who said it, and I'm sure it's been said time and time again, but it's a privilege to play, to coach, to be part of the National League. It is not a right. It's a privilege. And based on those actions, I don't think they deserve that privilege. But my feelings on it don't matter because they have been reinstated. But I'm curious. Let me know your thoughts down below on this touchy subject, of course, in the comment section. I honestly don't know if any of these guys are going to get much of an opportunity, though. Stan Bowman probably will as an advisor somewhere, but honestly, the guy's not a good GM. He didn't do a good job. I don't know why anyone would want him around other than for his father's expertise or something like that. He's not like the passing of the bloodline of the great general managers and coaches of the league. Joel Quenneville will be the interesting one. Joel Quenneville for sure. Second winningest coach of all time. There have been numerous players that have said that Quenneville is their favorite coach of all time. I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever if another NHL franchise gives him an opportunity. Of course, it will not be the Chicago Blackhawks. Those days are long gone, but I wouldn't be surprised in the next 365 days if Joel Quenneville was a head coach once again. Let me know your thoughts on that matter in the comment section, but that's going to take care of today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Be sure to go and hit that subscribe button. Help me out as I'm on the climb to 2,000 subscribers. 100% free, won't cost you anything. If you like what I'm posting on a daily basis, please go and smash the subscribe button. And also, go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free wherever you may be listening to your podcast. That way, if you're driving to work and you want to catch up on one of the latest episodes, you don't got to be watching the YouTube video and have to skip through ads and whatnot and all that stuff. You can go and throw it on in the car, car, plug in your aux, go and listen to it. Be sure to follow Locked On Blackhawks wherever you get your podcasts as well. You can find me on X at Jack Bushman 2. Check out my Strictly Blackhawks account as well at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. Until tomorrow's episode, everyone, stay safe. Have a great rest of your Tuesday. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every